We have present councillors Allison, Anderson, Brown, Carmichael, Chalmers, Clark, Convery. We don't have Councillor Cooper in the meeting at the moment. We have apologies from Councillor Cowan. Councillor Johnson-Dempsey is substituting. We have present councillors Devlin, Fagan, Ferguson Miller, Frame. We have apologies from Councillor Hamilton and Councillor Handibode is substituting. We have present councillors Kerr, Logan, Loudon, McAllen. We have apologies from Councillor McClyman and Councillor Scott substituting. And we have present councillors McKeary, Leslie MacDonald, McLachlan, Nelson, Ray. We have apologies from Councillor Razak and Councillor Cowie is substituting. And we have present councillors Robb, Ross, Shearer and Walker. And I'll hand back to the Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we get into the business of the meeting, just 2 points to raise. The first is that under Standing Order 4C, I've agreed to consideration of an urgent item of business, which will come at the end of the agenda, and I believe a report has now been circulated to members of the committee. And I also just want to draw the committee's attention to the fact that today is Young Carers Action Day, and I'm sure we will all be very appreciative and recognise the work of young carers across South Lanarkshire. Can I come to item 1, which is declarations of interest? Can I ask if there are any declarations of interest? Please indicate now. I'm not seeing any declarations of interest. Can I say at this point, although it's not my intention to declare an interest in relation to item 7 on the response to the consultation on dual mandates in the Scottish Parliament, I think it's now a matter of public record that I'm a candidate for the Scottish Parliament for the constituency of East Kilbride, but the connection is not judged to be such. It's not judged by me to be such that it would constitute an interest, and I have indeed taken advice on the matter. Can I come now to item 2, which are the minutes of the previous meeting? Are there any questions on the minutes of the previous meeting? I'm not seeing any questions, so can we agree those minutes?
Agreed.
Agreed. We are agreed. Can I come now to item 3, which is the revenue budget monitoring paper for period 11, and can I ask Jackie Taylor to speak to the report? Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. This is our regular revenue budget monitoring report. This is taking us to the 24th of January this year. The report picks up the previously reported probable outturn position for our general services budget, and that's covered at section 4 of the report. You will recall that we have reported an underspend of £13.7 million. That's after agreed transfers to reserves. That underspend reflected the position around loan charges and also around underspends expected in utilities and council tax. And that position is summarised at section 4.3 for you on page 12. As you're aware, the proposals around how these were to be managed were picked up as part of the budget that was set on the 26th of February. Also within this report at section 5.2, it picks up that as part of the Scottish Government budget process, we were notified of funding for 24-25. That was in relation to a process where we were to manage our 23-24 local government pay increase. The government were indicating that they would give us money for that, so we were required to use reserves in that year on a one-off basis, and we have now received the funding back to replenish those reserves. The usual appendices are covered from page 14, which shows the breakdown of our budgets and spend over resource services and also over our HRA budget, which is at appendix 3 of the report on page 16. In relation to housing revenue account at section 6 of the report, we are continuing to report a break-even position expected for the end of the year. If I take committee back to the recommendations at section 2, we're asking that the break-even position after transfer to reserves for general services is noted, that the current forecast for the revenue account for general services and the actual spend is noted, and also the break-even position on the housing revenue account and actual spend to the 24th of January is also noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions in this report? Could you please indicate now? I'm not seeing any questions. Can I ask a question, Jackie, which is just, has there been any update on the situation with regards to teacher numbers, which affects both the current financial year that's coming to an end, but also had those budget implications for the next financial year, which we dealt with as part of the budget process?
So in relation to the current financial year, we have received all of the funding that we were expecting around teacher numbers. That was clarified and we have now received that. That was what we were expecting within our budget, so there's no impact on this year for us. We weren't given any advice on whether our mitigations for why our teacher numbers reduced were acceptable or not. All councils in Scotland received their share of funding. There was no penalties placed for 24-25. In relation to next financial year, as members will be aware, within our budget proposal, we have had to build in an amount of money that assumes that we may be asked to reinstate teacher numbers into 25-26, as there is still no clarity around whether we will be expected to reinstate teacher numbers back to our 2023 levels. We are engaging with the Scottish Government on that, and we've arranged for a discussion with them to try and ensure that we get the certainty that we're looking for as quickly as possible into the new financial year.
Thank you for that, Jackie. And I think that kind of crystallises why it's so important that we have a definitive answer on the subject of mitigations. So I would like to suggest that I know that you, our officials, indeed myself and others, will be continuing to try and just bottom out this position. I would like to suggest, if the committee is agreeable, that we do so as a council and are prepared to use freedom of information legislation to get to the answer that we need to get to in order to work out how we take this forward, because it does not seem to me to be acceptable that other councils have clarity about why mitigations have been accepted, but we do not. And if the committee is agreeable, I think that's a course of action I'd like us to take forward.
I'd second that, Chair.
In agreement? Okay, thank you very much for that. In relation to the report itself, then, can we just agree the recommendations in the report? To note the recommendations were agreed. We then come to item 4, which is the capital budget monitoring for the same period, and it's back to you, Jackie.
Thank you. So this is now our capital budget monitoring covering the same period, so that's up to the 24th of January this year. If I take you to section 4 of the report, we summarise that our general fund programme is £69.8 million for this year. Our forecast that's covered at section 4.4 is that we will spend £59 million of that. That's in line with the figure we reported to the last committee. That forecast underspend simply reflects the timing of when we expect to get spend through, and the funding for those projects will be carried forward to allow those projects to complete in 25-26. Our actual spend that we've incurred up to the 24th of January was £36.2 million. In terms of funding at section 4.8, we're picking up that funding for the year includes additional allocation for general capital grant of £1.1 million. This is in relation to funding that the government have found themselves able to allocate in 24-25, but it's on the basis that they will recover that in future years. Therefore, it's not additional funding into our capital programme over the medium term. So we're proposing that we utilise that funding in 24-25 in place of planned borrowing. And then when that funding is reduced again from our general capital grant, we will reinstate that borrowing requirement. Our housing programme is covered at section 5 on page 18. We have a capital programme for housing of £77.2 million. And again, in line with what we reported to last committee, we're expecting to spend £73.1 million of that. And the reasons for the underspend are covered at section 5.3. In terms of actual spend on our housing programme, £46.1 million was spent to the 24th of January. The appendices, as usual, cover the funding for the capital programmes in appendices 2 and 3 for the housing programme. If I take you back to the recommendations, we're asking that the position for the general fund capital programme and the housing capital programme be noted, and that we continue to monitor the capital programme through our Financial Resources Scrutiny Forum. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jackie. Can I ask if there are any questions in that report? Could you indicate now? I'm not seeing any questions. Can we agree the report?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Come now to item 5, which is on an update to funding, and back to you, Jackie.
Thank you. Again, a regular report to committee. This is an update to funding. We have 2 to report this cycle, and they are covered in Appendix 1 on page 25. The first relates to a notification that we were successful in getting £224,000 from the School Meal Debt Fund that the Scottish Government had offered. This was a bid process that allows us to cover debt that we have written off already this year, and also to allow for further write-offs that are required in line with our policy around school meal debt. The other item on that page, on page 25, is in relation to the funding that we've now been reimbursed for around the 23-24 local government pay arrangement that I covered in our revenue report earlier. In terms of recommendations, we're asking that that additional funding be noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask if there are any questions? Not seeing any questions. Oh, sorry. Councillor Allison.
Sorry, Chair, just a quick one for clarification. So if this is to cover debt that we've already written off, it suggests that there's £224,000 to add to the revenue budget. Where's it going?
So that will allow us to cover the £84,000 that we've already written off of debt. So that will pay for that. And there's also another £100,000 that will be considered for write-off in the coming months. That will then allow that £224,000 to be used to cover those write-offs. Any balance will be retained to cover any future write-offs of debt.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I come back to the recommendations? Can we agree to note the report, please?
Agreed.
We are agreed. I'll come now to item 6, which is a response to the consultation on a local authority general power of competence, and Ian Strachan will speak to the report. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. So, yes, the purpose of the report advised the committee of a consultation by the Scottish Government on a local authority general power of competence and to seek committee's approval to a proposed response by the Council to the consultation. Local authorities, we can only do what statute empowers us to do, anything else being unlawful as beyond our powers. That creates an issue. As authorities might not feel able to progress with a particular project or initiative without a clear statutory authority to do so. A general power of competence, as set out in the report, is effectively commonly defined as anything individuals may generally do. It's available to authorities in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and as such it would provide power to act even where there isn't a specific statutory power to do so. Inevitably, the consultation is pretty technical, although there's some helpful overview in there of the current legal framework. In terms of the proposed response, from an officer perspective, it's been drafted on the basis that the powers currently available to local authorities are not broad enough to enable us to take the action that we now need to take. And what local government needs is a clear and unambiguous power that enables it to take forward the activities, commercial or otherwise, that it believes are in the best interests of its citizens and communities. This committee considered a report on commercial opportunities in December that provided examples of opportunities through town centre regeneration, inward investment and so on. It is likely that as areas such as this, the Council would look to explore further and utilise a broader legal framework where that was required. It's not clear the timescales for the government to take forward this proposal, assuming there's support for it. If there was, then of course we would feed into that consultation in the normal way, and I know that COSLA has already considered and pulling together a consultation response. I maybe just draw committee's attention to question 4, which also seeks views on any further existing legislative barriers to delivery of public services and a broad range of activity that authorities would wish to undertake. So in respect of that, we propose an easing of restrictions to enable the Council to grant mid-market rent leases and greater flexibility in the public procurement regulations to support more use of local SMEs, third sector providers. So if I just go back to the recommendations, asking that committee note the contents of this report and approve the submission of the response by the Council to the consultation. The consultation closes at the end of the month. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions on this report? And can I come to Kirsten Robb?
Thank you. I'm happy to support the submission. I think this is a really interesting and important change, hopefully, that's going to happen. I think it really ties in with councils having more powers to decide for themselves what's best for their area, with all the normal checks and balances that you've laid out in the report there. So just to welcome it, it's an opportunity to innovate, an opportunity for the council to try new things in line with our community wealth building and so on. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. I endorse Councillor Robb's comments myself. And if there are no other questions, can I draw us back to the recommendations? Can we agree the report? Agreed. We're agreed. Thank you very much. I'll come now to item 7, which is a response to the consultation on dual mandates in the Scottish Parliament. And Ian, could I ask you to speak to this report as well?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so another consultation by the Scottish Government, this time on dual mandates, again seeking approval to a proposed response. This follows on the back of the Scottish Elections Representation and Reform Act that it now is, which placed a duty on the ministers to bring forward regulations that would have the effect of prohibiting dual mandates in respect of MSPs and MPs in the House of Lords, but also may make provision effectively ending dual mandates for councillors and MSPs, and the consultation seeks views on that. From an officer perspective, the response has been drafted on the basis that the questions on dual mandates of MSPs and MPs peers aren't for the council to respond to. Appreciate the committee may have an alternative view on that. But what we have proposed as responses to the questions around the MSP councillor dual mandates. Briefly, in terms of should the law be changed to prohibit an MSP from being councillor at the same time, we are suggesting yes, that the dual mandates should be ended. In terms of a grace period, we're suggesting 6 months should provide sufficient time for a councillor to resign a by-election to take place, but provided that where there is a scheduled local government election within a year, then that additional period is permitted. You'll be aware that it's local government that itself meets the cost of council elections, by-elections. The last by-election we held here in July 23, the cost for that was approximately £60,000. The cost would have gone up in the intervening period, so being mindful of that, it seems sensible to have an extended period where there is a scheduled local government election coming up. The other questions relate to dual mandates and grace periods and whether there should be any limitation on salaries, participation and so on during that grace period. We're suggesting that there shouldn't be because it is a grace period. And in terms of the recommendations, looking for the contents of the report to be noted and the consultation response to be approved. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask if there are any questions in this report? Can I come to Robert Brown?
Yeah, just on question 14, if I may, relating to the salary bit, it seems in principle to me, just looking at this further, that you shouldn't be in a position really to take 2 salaries, if you like, in that kind of ball game. And I just wonder what the logic was of saying, well, that should be okay.
I think it's really taking the same approach that it's a grace period. So from that perspective, if that individual is there able to fully perform both roles, then they should be entitled to take the full salary. With that, of course, it's always within an individual's gift, if you like, not to do so and to give some of that up. I know that's happened elsewhere in the past, but it was applying the same logic. Councillor Brown.
Yes, I'm a bit sceptical about that one, to be quite honest. I do think that actually raises a number of public, use of public money and public perception sort of issues, which might take a different approach. I don't know what other colleagues feel about that.
Okay, could I come to Councillor Allison?
Thanks, Chair. Generally in agreement with the, I hate these words, direction of the paper. I think it is important that there is a backstop, if you like. I don't think it's right that if maybe had something going on for years, someone being a councillor, an MSP, MP, councillor, which is a bit that affects us. I'm not so certain about having this deadline. We're going to have Holyrood elections next year, if my maths are right, and it could be councillors in this council are elected as MSPs. I think the chair yourself, you're hoping that will happen. But what happens if it's one day over the year before we come to another council election? I just think it's too firm. Could we not add the words, unless the council agree, to this recommendation? Because to run a by-election, I think in here it's figured at £60,000. I'm not sure that's a good use of money either. So yes, agreement in the general way of some not concerns. It's interesting what they're going to do with the salaries as well. But I'd like to give us as much flexibility as possible, and whether a slight changing of word in our recommendations would help that.
Okay. Can I ask Ian to respond to this, maybe explain what it is? There's a couple of people want to take points. I'll maybe come through all the points and then we'll try and kind of sum up and work out what is there a consensus for. Right, Ian, so do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, no, thank you, Councillor Alison. I mean, inevitably, any where you have a fixed time period, there's always potentially an element of arbitrariness to it, and there could be instances like that. I'm not sure, because if you're, this is, I suppose, looked at from the Scottish Parliament's perspective, and so I'm not sure that they would be content with bringing forward regulations where dual mandates, if you like, for a particular elected representative were almost like in the gift of a council, if you like. I think they would probably wish to have certainty around that. I mean, if the committee are supportive, we could look to put that in. But I'm not sure, you know, as I say, that would be supportive. I think having that extended period is helpful. But I think, as I say, with any fixed period, there's always an element there. It might just not be favourable for a particular set of circumstances.
Alec, I see that you're looking to come back in, so do you want to come just now?
Yeah, so Ian, the practicalities of this. If someone waits till 1 day within the year before they resign, would that cover it? Or are they supposed to resign and have the by-election within a year? Or what's the, how in the real world will this work?
Could I, for the sake of moving the discussion, I'll bring Ian in just a second, but I think the proposal is that if this were to go ahead, there would be a grace period of 6 months, because theoretically that vacancy could arise at any time. There is a pattern in Scottish politics just now of the council elections usually coming about a year after a Scottish Parliament election. That is exactly what the paper is trying to pick up, so that rather than cause potentially a number of by-elections, we can just carry them forward to the next date that reduces the cost to the taxpayer. I think your point is how strictly should that be worded? And I would just stress that this is a consultation response. The work of how you pull together the necessary parts of the legislation or the secondary legislation or whatever it might be will be for the Scottish Parliament to decide in legislation. And I know that these are the very issues that when you get into that level of detail around legislation that Parliament and their various advisors would consider. Ian, is there anything that you want to add just to pick that point up?
Yeah, all I was going to add was that the trigger here is envisaged from when the individual is returned as an MSP. So it isn't from when they would resign as a councillor, if you like. The clock starts when they return to Holyrood.
Okay. I think approximate is the key word. Can I come now to Councillor Robb?
Thank you. I'm happy with the dates in the paper there, but I do agree with Robert. I think taking 2 salaries when you've chosen to become an MSP is just not good. MSPs get paid plenty, and I would encourage and even move to the council should give up their salary if they become MSPs. Particularly, it could be a contribution to pay for a by-election and save the public purse as well.
Okay. There were some other hands up, but I think they've all gone back down. Could I suggest that what we do in the report is simply note that in terms of the kind of discussion that's taken place today, that a point has been made around just how this should be worded in future, but I think we're agreed with the principle. And could I suggest that the point has been raised in the committee that about the grace periods? I've lost the right part of the question, but just to acknowledge that that's a view that's been expressed in the committee. limiting, sorry. Unless people are minded to move otherwise, what I'm trying to do is just capture some of the discussion and then ensure and then maybe delegate to Ian to ensure that that's reflected in the submission that's made. Is that agreeable? Or would Councillor Brown?
I'm just not sure what that means in terms of the salary thing. I do think it actually is, you know, the more I think about it, it is a matter of principle, I think, that there shouldn't be two salaries from public purse. I think that should be reflected in the response. But I was seeking other people's views on that if there was a different view, clearly.
Right, okay. So I've now got hands going up again. So could I just, before I come into, could I take Councillor Ross, then I'll come back to the for a response on that. So Councillor Ross.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. It was only when you said there at the end that you would be taking these comments and go forward. Well, I would probably like to strengthen that comment then, because I do agree with both Kirsten and Robert that we should be looking at only taking one salary. But more importantly, I think it's disingenuous to try and do two jobs over that period, because I don't think either one of them would be done effectively. We have a number of councillors who only do the one job simply because it takes all of their time. To try and do two jobs, I think, as I say, at the end of the day is probably worse than taking two salaries. So from my point of view, I would add my comments to that if we're putting something forward, that we should be looking at one salary and one job as being the best result at the end of the day. Thank you very much.
Right, okay. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. I see Paul Manning wants to come in. Paul?
Listen, thanks, Chair. And just picking up on members' comments and how we would deal with this, and just, I'm remembering myself, this is the response to a consultation that we've put together, and Ian's explained the sort of principles that we've worked to. Now, when we've done this in the past, what we've done, bearing in mind it's a consultation, is capture the comments that have been made at the committee and reflect them back, because they'll be of value to the Scottish Parliament as well. So if I could suggest we do that, and that way all of the viewpoints and strengths of opinion that we've heard can be taken into account.
Correct. So that's what I was going to say. I think the issue, as I understand now, is specifically the wording of question 14, because the wording in the official's response is that there should be no such limitations, and the point now is that 3 people have spoken to say actually there should be a limitation. And I think to come back to Ian's point, whatever it says in law, I know when a number of people have been in that position, they've voluntarily kind of surrendered their salary anyway, or they've donated it to charity or whatever else. So I think what we're really, in terms of reflecting the discussion today, I think what we're basically saying is, can we change the response to question 14 rather than, and that, so are people in agreement with that? We're basically, for the reasons that have been outlined, I would trust Ian to be able to summarise that in an appropriate way. We want to change the response to question 14 to say that during any grace period, that actually there should be a limitation on holding the salary instead. Is the committee minded to agree with that?
Yeah.
Right, we're agreed. Okay. Can I then bring us back to the recommendations in the report as a whole? And with that change, can we agree the recommendations? Agreed. We're agreed. Okay, can I come now to item 8, which is on land and property transfers and disposals? And Jerry McParland is going to speak to this paper. So Jerry, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report, which is contained in pages 59 to 63 of the papers, is to advise committee of the actions required in respect of land and property transactions. Details of land and property which is potentially suitable for redevelopment or disposal are circulated to all resources and community planning partners to establish if they are suitable for alternative operational use. Recommendations are made following consideration of planning, title and other legal constraints, with any competing interests judged against council priorities. The specific properties in this report are detailed in section 4 and are namely Westwood Hill Recreation Area and the former Hayley's Hill Sports Barn. Housing Services have undertaken initial development assessment on the Westwood Hill Recreation Area and have requested that the site, which is detailed in Appendix A, be transferred from the Community and Enterprise account to the Housing Revenue account for inclusion in the Council's new build housing programme. The site is in the current social housing investment plan as high priority over 2 phases, with the first phase provisionally programmed for delivery by 2027. Appendix B details the situation with the former Hairleys Hill Sports Barn. At the meeting on the 7th of February 2024, the Housing and Technical Resources Committee approved a concession lease to Rivals School of Martial Arts. The lease commenced on the 1st of March and is due to expire on the 28th of May 2025. However, shortly after the lease commenced, a fire occurred at the sports barn, and the fire was deemed to be started as a result of willful fire-raising attack, and the building suffered extensive damage because of it. As a result, following discussions with the tenants, a notice to quit has been served, and the authority has now sought to declare the property surplus to enable it to be marketed for redevelopment in its current state. In both cases, a capital receipt for general services fund will be generated, and in the case of Hairleys Hill Sports Barn, should a successful disposal be achieved, the council's liability for the property would also be removed. I would therefore refer members to the recommendations in paragraph 2 of the report and ask committee to approve that the land and property identified in Appendix A be reallocated as detailed, and that the land detailed in Appendix B be declared surplus to council requirements and transferred to the Corporate Land Bank for disposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions, and could I come to Richard Nelson?
Thank you, Chair. Just to discuss on the sports ban, I think it's very disheartening to hear that we're now losing another facility in Larkhall. Yes, we've got that money through the budget into Larkhall Leisure Centre, which is absolutely wonderful. But we just need to make sure that we push forward in the right direction for Larkhall to make sure that this leisure centre is on track to get built, because that's another facility that we'll lose again in Larkhall, which is disheartening. Because it was setting fire straight after the lease was done. So again, just to make sure, Chair, I did have discussions with David Booth over the phone earlier on and get these things moving forward. But it's just disheartening and worrying that Larkhall's lost another facility now over the years. No fault of the council, obviously, but I think just to make sure on record that we get this moving forward for the Larkhall Leisure Centre as quick as we can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I think I'm right in saying the capital receipt that would come from Hairleys Hill would go into the leisure centre. I think I'm quite right in saying that. Yeah. Okay. Could I come to Kirsten Robb?
Thank you. It's about the Westwood Hill pitches. I remember there wasn't much information in the report, because I remember a few years ago this was the nursery site, wasn't it? And there was a bit of controversy, but also the council gave support to the community to produce a neighbourhood plan, which I just picked up today. So I just wanted to ask, has the council re-engaged with the community on this site? And until that happens, I will definitely abstain on this, because I think there is a neighbourhood plan, and I'd like to see what efforts can be made if this site is transferred to accommodate community interests, to make sure it maximise benefits and minimise the impact on the community. So it was just to ask, have housing, are you looking at this neighbourhood plan? Are you working with the community to develop the plans?
Right. Thanks, Councillor Robb. And off the back of your comments and the inclusion of this, I'll pick up with housing and with the community engagement team. And engagement with the community will be at the forefront of everybody's mind in dealing with this. Thank you.
Could I come to Leslie MacDonald?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jerry, for this report. I, for one, am delighted that something's going to happen with the former sports barn. It's been a blot in the landscape for almost a year since it was set on fire. A lot of people in Larkhall ask constantly what's happening with it. Are we going to repair it? I understand the financial situation that we're not repairing it, and I'm now delighted that it's here for disposal. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And could I come now to Robert Brown?
Yes, I probably should know this, Chair, but there's the insurance position on properties like the sports barn. Do we self-insure on these things? What's the precise position on that?
Thanks for your question. In relation to this particular site, we have received insurance money for this, and that is included within the funding package for the Larkhall Leisure Centre. So on this occasion, we have received cash in from the insurer.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask if there are any other questions? Can I come now to the report itself, and can I ask, I think Councillor Robb's indicated he should abstain, but with the exception of Councillor Robb, is there, can I ask the committee, can we agree the recommendations? Agreed. We're agreed. Thank you. Can I come now to item 9, which is a paper on councillors' remuneration, and can I ask Jackie Taylor to speak to this report?
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an update on the councillors' remuneration levels following the review that was carried out by the Scottish Local Authorities Remuneration Committee, or SLARC, as it's known. Background section 3 covers some information around how councillors' remuneration levels are set. Remuneration levels are set through statute, and statutory instruments are provided annually that gives us a level of remuneration for councillors, for leader and for provost. It doesn't include specific levels for senior councillors. We have 19 senior councillors within the council. The maximum number that we are allowed is detailed within that statutory instrument that we get on an annual basis. And every year, salary levels for our senior councillors are uprated in line with the percentage that increases in our statutory instrument for basic councillors. Section 4 on page 65 covers the SLARC review. Now, this review recognised there was a need for a review of councillors' pay to make sure that terms and conditions reflected the responsibilities of a modern-day councillor, and that remuneration didn't act as a barrier to encourage a diverse range of people to stand for elected office. Final report from SLARC was published in February 24, and recommendations included salary levels for the position of leader, civic heads, or provost in our case, and councillors, and that was to take effect from the 1st of April. Section 5.1 covers the levels that are now set within the statutory instrument that we have now received. So as I say, that includes the remuneration for leader, a level for councillors and a maximum level for the provost. The setting of the remuneration levels for senior councillors is subject to a maximum amount that we have to keep our senior councillors' remuneration within. Section 5.2 and 5.3 cover the salaries that are proposed in the statutory instrument for leader and councillor and civic head. The increase that is proposed for senior councillors for South Lanarkshire Council reflects the percentage increase that has been applied in the statutory instrument to the salary for councillor, and that's in line with what we have done in previous years. And going forward, as covered at 5.6, we are suggesting that in accordance with what we have done in the past, that annually that we will apply an uplift to senior councillors' posts in line with that increase detailed in the statutory instrument that we get on an annual basis. So taking us back to the recommendations, we're asking that the remuneration levels payable from the 1st of April 25 for the post of leader and councillor as set out in the statutory instrument is noted, that the proposed remuneration levels, again payable from the 1st of April for the post of provost and senior councillors as set out in the report is approved, and also that the automatic uprating of remuneration levels each year in line with the increase detailed in the statutory instrument for the leader, provost, councillor and senior councillors be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask if there are any questions on this report? I'm not seeing any questions. Can we agree the recommendations? Agreed. We're agreed. Can I come now to item 10? These are items for noting now, and what item 10 is an interim update on the 10-year estate strategy, and Craig Jardine is going to speak to the report. Craig.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report on pages 69 to 76 is to provide an interim update to members on the development and implementation of a cross-cutting review of the Council's property asset base, which also links into the intention to seek approval for a 10-year estate strategy, and to provide a summary of tasks undertaken to date and confirm the timescales for the subsequent phase of this exercise. So in terms of background, the geography and changing communities of South Lanarkshire are diverse, with a range of needs requiring a variety of responses. Responding to strategic change requires a balance of South Lanarkshire-wide strategic approaches and place-based collaborations to maximise public value. A clear focus on local service needs through change will help drive more partner collaboration, greater adoption of technology and a more co-production with communities. So the Scottish Government declared a climate emergency in 2019 and set a legal target for Scotland to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. So South Lanarkshire has taken action to decarbonise a limited proportion of its property estate through a series of low carbon and retrofit approaches. At the same time, budgetary pressures have necessitated an increased focus on efficiency, savings and value for money across the public sector to ensure that essential service can be delivered within increasingly constrained financial resources. So a combination of changing population and service need, the delivery of the net zero agenda and ongoing financial challenges are shaping the approach to realising a smaller but higher quality, more efficient core estate in South Lanarkshire that balances people, place and financial considerations. Key aim is to secure approval of a 10-year estate strategy that will inform and guide future land and property decisions on the investment, rationalisation, co-location and disposal of assets, taking account of community, financial and service considerations. So in developing the estate strategy, it will inform decisions on the most suitable, sustainable estate to serve the needs of communities and partners across South Lanarkshire places. The strategy will build on national best practice, including Scottish Government's investment hierarchy and Scottish Futures Trust Guide to Property Asset Strategy. So this will aim to effectively support public service delivery in the future and help us deliver people and place-based and objectives, explore opportunities to work collaboratively with other public sector bodies, inform and guide future land and property decisions on investment, rationalisation, co-location and disposal of assets, direct investment into a reduced but higher quality energy efficient core estate, facilitate the transition to net zero for our smaller, higher quality estate, promote community asset transfer where this is appropriate, and contribute to financial pressures facing the Council in South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture. So as reported at the Performance Review and Scrutiny Forum in August 24 and the Members' Awareness Session on 12th of December 24, the strategy developed is split into 3 interrelated phases. So phase 1 is well underway and almost complete, and that comprises of an initial data review of assets and properties within the Council's public building estate. And this phase will undertake a review of future service needs and demand across South Lanarkshire, develop an initial scoring of all properties within the public estate based on quantitative data and supported by stakeholder engagement, and using this information identify and invest and retain properties that meet our long-term strategic needs and that they are accessible and compliant, are well utilised and or could support service consolidation. Phase 2 utilises the data gathered in Phase 1 and that will explore and identify potential service transformation initiatives, make the case for investment in new service models, identify funding sources that could finance aspects of delivering the state strategy alongside alignment with internal capital budgets, and create a potential list of prioritised real estate project pipeline against each potential funding source based on availability and achievability. And a lot of this is still unclear in terms of what funding packages will be coming from Scottish Government, but we want to try and get on the front foot to ensure that we are in the best possible place to apply for funding when it's announced. And Phase 3 comprises the development of the estate strategy and an associated 10-year delivery plan, setting out a mix of joined-up place-based service integration opportunities and specific estate proposals. In terms of the assessment criteria, this is produced and proposed strategy is informed by robust evidence-based data, service ambitions and place-based priorities. It's therefore important to evaluate the performance of our assets against a consistent and structured set of criteria. And the suite of criteria was noted at the PRSF in August 24, It was also highlighted in the members' session, awareness session on the vision for the future relationship between the Council and South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture on the 12th of December. So the selection criteria are as follows. So it's all based on cost effectiveness, sustainability objectives, service delivery and transformation, placemaking and use and utilisation. So using this methodology, we'll calculate a cumulative score for each asset. This will promote a strategic and outcome-focused objective methodology to asset management, will inform and guide future land and property decisions on investment, rationalisation, co-location and disposal. In terms of asset scoring, we will deal with this by bringing together the output of service need conversations, which is ongoing at present, with a clear sense of what different could look like in different places and assets, applying the asset assessment criteria to each property and calculating a score. We can categorise properties into 3 distinct groups. So we have decided to use core, which are properties scoring highly across multiple criteria that will be classified as core assets. These properties will be considered essential to the Council's operations and are expected to be retained on a long-term basis, supporting joined-up service and anchoring place-based change. Flex, which are properties with moderate scores or those with potential for improvement, and these will be categorised as flex assets. These properties may require further intervention to determine their long-term future, and over time the goal is to move flex assets to core or tail to strengthen service futures and or place-based objectives. And the final category, as I said there, was tail, so properties with consistently low scores across multiple criteria. These properties will typically be considered suitable for disposal, demolition or repurposing, and will subsequently be maintained to a minimum standard until the future use is agreed, taking into account of the wider needs and opportunities of place. Each category will be tested against local service needs and ensure outcomes are maximised from both an asset and services perspective as part of project development and delivery phase of the future estate strategy. In terms of consultation, we'll have an engagement plan that will be developed and will inform residents and others about the Council's work to create the 10-year strategy and engage all audiences, especially users of our properties and assets. We will aim to do this by informing stakeholders by providing details about the review, seek views on future requirements, be transparent about what we recommend and why, be realistic about the challenges and give confidence about the future. So while not exhaustive, this will include residents and especially regular users of our properties and assets, community groups, elected members, local businesses and partners. So at the implementation stage, communications will begin shortly with all the Council's communication channels used to inform and engage. Additional consultation with all the audiences identified above will take place at key stages of the review to continue informing and engaging people regarding the process and outcomes. In terms of next steps, this is included and covers a number of areas which will include service delivery mapping. That's an engagement process with departments and stakeholders across the Council to clarify future service plans and accommodation needs. Operational decarbonisation, which is a costed implementation model which will be developed to manage carbon emissions across the Council. Further development of options taking account of our people, place and sustainability objectives. In this phase, we'll explore options for investment and possible rationalisation. The draft estate strategy will include updated financial projections and provide a comprehensive roadmap for the future of the estate, addressing challenges and incorporating stakeholder feedback. Draft delivery plan. So this plan will explore potential funding opportunities, as I covered earlier, and set out a prioritised list of investment interventions required to realise the full asset management plan. And it should be noted that a further update report will be presented to the Exec Committee in June 25, with a date for the final report still to be determined. In terms of consultation, as I said, that's just about to be underway, and the feedback of any engagement up to that point will be reported back to the June Executive Committee. In terms of other implications, it's essential to note that the digital transformation programme underway within the Council will need to align with the estate strategy, both during defined phases and beyond. This alignment will ensure that digital innovations and initiatives support the strategic goals of the estate strategy, enhance service delivery and improve operational efficiency. So if I could just take you back to section 2, the recommendations. So the Exec Committee is asked to approve the following recommendations, which is that the progress made to date and the next steps as set out in section 8 of this report be noted, that the proposed approach and timelines for public and stakeholder consultation as set out in section 7 is noted, and to note that a further report will be presented to Exec Committee on 25th of June 25. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions? Could you indicate now? There are quite a few, so I'll try to get through these as quickly as I can. Can I come to Councillor Margaret Walker?
Thanks, Chair. Just thank you for the very comprehensive report. And just, it's really an observation, well, a question in terms of phase 2, what the timescale around stage 2 will be. But an observation, this is a fairly major report with quite fundamental implications in terms of how we deliver services, because obviously the review of the estate and making buildings more fit for purpose, to allow for more integration of services and place-based services. That's a fairly significant piece of work, and it will impact how we deliver services, because it's linked to service transformation, and obviously service transformation across the authority isn't an easy task, and also involves, I'm assuming, a consultation with staff, trade unions, and all of that. So it's just to acknowledge this is a fairly major piece of work that's going to have significant impact on the council and how we deliver services, an impact on the residents, staff, everyone who's involved in that process. And it was also just to ask, you talk about identifying funding sources. I assume this will take quite a lot in terms of staff resources and time and expertise around interpreting data and focusing the data more forensically than we do at the moment. And I don't know if maybe the whole Marmot process would have any role in that and how we deliver this. So I suppose my question is, in terms of staffing and resource implications, what kind of funding sources are out there, and how do you see staff being supported through this process? I mean, obviously, it makes sense, obviously, to use our buildings better, and I'm sure there are buildings that would be, suited to having, allocation more of services, across planning and building or health and social work, and that we could work in better ways. But this is a major exercise. So I suppose my key questions is, in terms of phase 2, what's the time scale, and what sort of funding resources and other resources are out there to support people through this process? And also the devil's in the detail, so it will be interesting to see a more detailed delivery plan relating both to services and the estate, so that we can get underneath it a wee bit, because at the moment it's a report with a lot of big words in it. But it would be good to have more detailed delivery timescales and actions, and also if you're looking at KPIs, performance indicators, what kind of outcomes we're looking for, and assume that will all go through the appropriate committees. And I would also suggest that a longer period of time, another members' awareness session would be useful in this, that you could programme in quite a few sort of updates and awareness sessions around it, which I assume will be happening with the staff, trade unions as well. I mean, this is a very significant report, so thank you.
Okay, Craig, do you want to respond to that, please, before I take any more questions?
Okay, thanks for the question. Just to confirm on the funding side, so both from a staffing perspective, we have our own teams working on that, and there are teams across the council, but we do have a lot of really good information internally. We are getting a number of different, for example, operational use, customer survey information from the Leisure Trust. We're getting a lot of information from our education colleagues, and a lot of different strands of information is playing into the raw data about buildings, but it's not just about that. So we're fairly well concluded on that part of it. It has been a bit of an exercise, but we're in a good position. We do have good internal information. We are supported by Turner & Townsend, one of our consultants, for pulling all this together and helping with the engagement process. And that's been really helpful, and they are industry experts in that process. From an external funding point of view, as I said earlier, we are part of the external funding package that may come out from Scottish Government, because it's not out yet, is that we want to be in the front foot. So one of the exercises we're doing through the initial phase of the project is we are looking at buildings that would seek appropriate funding. So the main issue around that is, from a building point of view, it's strategic to keep, fabric-wise, it's maybe in reasonable condition, but from a sustainability point of view, it's poor. So we're putting up between 5 and 10 buildings forward as a pilot to be properly surveyed as part of this exercise, so that we've got some really good information coming if Scottish Government announce, or whoever announce, additional funding that we can tap into. So those feasibility studies really put us in a good position to say, right, we know exactly what we want to pursue. So whether that's detailed intrusive surveys or actual investment work, that's the kind of position we want to be in to react to that right away, and we feel that's a really good position to be in. In terms of KPI indicators, we already have that internally for, condition, suitability, accessibility, all the usual stuff we report on. So we would develop our own suite of indicators moving forward, particularly on the sustainability side, and what it links into the climate change action plan that's obviously council-wide, and we feed into that already. So there's a bit of work to do there. That's probably more at the back end of this piece of work. And also, you mentioned member session. Yeah, we've had one already, but yes, I think it'd be good to, at each phase, keep you guys fully updated with where we are. As the update report in June will be very much a position statement at that point in time. And there is still an awful lot of work to do, and a lot of engagement, particularly with services and communities, to make sure that we are coming up with the right solution that has been tested. And that's the bit that I probably can't give a timeline for that at the moment. But certainly for the June report, we would hope to be in a position to say what the rest of the project plan is likely to look like at that point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could I now come to Jerry?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much. When I saw this come up at the executive pre-agenda, to me, in the 29 years this council has been in existence, this is the most dynamic report I've ever seen, because we've been a big grown-up council, and we're looking at the nuts and bolts and how everything comes together and how everything should go forward. I think it's a first-class report. There's a lot of work still to be done, as Craig has alluded to. But it's exciting. It's something we need. It's something that's been sadly lacking over the years. If I go back to when we started the school estate, it was a revolutionary idea at the time, and now we've got the best school estate in the whole of Britain. That's been acknowledged by councils up and down the length and breadth of this country, and I just hope that all political parties in this council get together and endorse this document going forward, and we'll end up serving the people who were elected to serve, and we'll be giving them quality, no quantity, but good first-class services. And it's a dynamic report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come to Alec Allison.
Thanks, Chair. I'm a little bit worried because I think I maybe agree with what Jerry was saying. Don't really have questions, but there's a couple of points I think that maybe come up through this. If we are directing towards we are directing towards net zero. But if point 3 you had for the buildings that are failing, if you like, on multiple issues, if we simply put them up for sale, we are then just exporting the carbon problem and helping our own figures, but not really contributing towards net zero nationally, if you like. So should we be looking at what we do when we're selling the business, the building? Should we be looking at making it conditional on them being made carbon neutral by those that take it over? I don't know. It's a thought, Chair, that's all. And finally, in my semi-sleeping state this morning, I think I heard that the Heat and Buildings Bill was to be withdrawn at 3.3. And I know we've got another update coming in June, but I'm wondering, does that give us any opportunities? Does it reduce the likelihood we'll get funding from Scottish Government to implement this strategy? I know it's far too early to have a thought around that, but I think it does need to become part, certainly, of the next paper as to what effect that will have, if any, on our strategy. Just these 2 points, Chair. Thanks.
So the heating and buildings bill, mouthful, is clearly part of that update report. I actually haven't heard that that's been withdrawn. We had the Scottish Heads of Property meeting last week and no one knew anything about that, so it's obviously hot off the press. Whether that is withdrawn or not, the objectives of it we would still intend to do, because essentially that really is around decarbonising heat sources. That's the main focus of that. So it's moving away from fossil fuel to a more sustainable delivery of heat sources, which is essentially electric heat pumps. And that's one of the main, or ground source, air source heat pumps. So that's the whole focus of it. So if the 2038 requirements not to do that are maybe been muddying the waters in terms of the overall net zero objective, that's fine, we can have a look at the detail of that. But the principle of it, we would want to deliver anyway. So whether it becomes, set in statute or not, that objective we would certainly want to try and deliver anyway.
Okay, thank you. And could I come now to Robert Brown?
Thanks very much, Chair. Can I join in thanks for the report? I've always had trouble with the phrase public sector reform. I've never been able to pin it down precisely what it meant, but insofar as it means practical things, I think this report is really what it's about. And the opportunities, as Jerry rightly says, I think are pretty exciting in terms of being able to move towards net zero and produce a more efficient state into the bargain. Really, a couple of link points, really. There's some talk in the paper about the placemaking approach, and I wondered in that context just to how far you are viewing this on a locality base. I do think there's a role for area committees as we go forward on this one to look at what, not just across the council as a whole, but what happens in the 4 localities and what the balance is there. And I appreciate that not every property is, it doesn't particularly matter about if a depot is particularly related to a particular locality, perhaps in the same way as a more public-facing service thing is. But nevertheless, I think the locality issue is quite important. And sort of linked to that, you rightly talked about the digital strategy. We've made big strides in regard to all that, but that does leave behind a tail of people who aren't particularly digitally conscious, if you like, and are finding it more difficult sometimes to engage with council services. Can we keep in our minds, if you like, as we go forward with this, just the need to have an element of public-facing advice, contact, and all that, and that the buildings have got that particular ability to, to reflect that where appropriate as well. I do think we need to think about that going forward. It's one of these things that's lurking there in the background, but we haven't actually come to grips with as much as we maybe should have done. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks for the question. In terms of the placemaking approach, we have been working closely with Scottish Futures Trust Estates team and asset team. And they actually held a workshop with the extended management team in December, where we spent a couple of hours looking at the whole placemaking approach and how you engage with communities and what we want to try and get out of that feeds into the strategy. So that piece of work is very much ongoing. We've got a couple of follow-up meetings with them organised within the next couple of weeks. So it's a kind of two-pronged approach, very much looking at the place agenda, but also the asset side, which particularly Turner & Townsend and our internal teams are working hard on. So we need to try and bring that together. So any final report will not just be talking about the actual, output of the building assessment. It's very much about, but what does that mean for local communities? And that's the hard bit, and that's the bit that probably takes more time than we think, because we need to engage with communities on that. If you take, for example, a rural property that might be in a shocking condition and it needs investment, that would normally fit in tail, for example. But if that's the only facility, then you've got no choice but to invest in that and make it appropriate for that local community. So there's all these discussions that need to keep happening until we get to a sensible proposal that can come back to members.
Okay, thank you very much for all those contributions. I just want to say that the net zero imperative that sits behind this is not going away. I take on board the point that Councillor Allison's made. There are developments this morning around that Heat and Buildings Bill. But what the Heat and Buildings Bill would do, as I understand it, is take the 2038 target for public sector buildings to become net zero and make it statutory. The target is still there. And of course, the 2045 target is very much in statute. So the direction in which we should be moving as an authority, and indeed as the wider public sector, is, to me, locked in. And I think some of the changes today were about were more about consumers and sort of residential properties. The other point I would make is that we've been dealing with a lot of challenges around our estate. Really, we've seen underinvestment and neglect, to be perfectly frank, and we've also seen big pressure on the revenue side of the budget. And we've seen changes, particularly around leisure and culture, driven by the pressure on the revenue side of the budget. My view is that, as far as possible, we want to make sure that you're injecting capital into the estate. That's why we put forward the Leisure and Culture Transformation Fund. That's why we put £24 million into the estate on the back of the last budget. But we've got to be realistic that the costs involved in moving to net zero and even just dealing with the condition of the estate are going to be enormous. And they are beyond the capacity of the council at this present time with the financial waivers available to us. So it's encouraging to hear in the report that we are engaging with the Scottish Futures Trust and others, and maybe looking to present ourselves as a pilot to get ahead of the pack and look to attract external investment for what we're trying to do. But I just want to impress on everyone in the committee the need for us to ramp up investment and find innovative ways of being able to generate investment in our estate to meet that net zero imperative that is not going away regardless of whatever changes have taken place today. Okay, can I come back then to the recommendations? Can we agree to note the report?
Agreed.
Can I come now to item 11, which is the South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture Commissioning Plan Progress Update, and David Booth is going to speak to this item. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair. This report is essentially a companion piece to the report and 10-year strategy which the committee has just discussed. The purpose of the report is to present an initial draft South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture Commissioning Plan for the period 2025 to 27. In terms of background, this initial plan, in accordance with the 3 work streams outlined in section 3.2 of the report, which are the Commission Plan itself, the long-term estate strategy, which we've just discussed, and agreeing a more solid financial relationship between South Lanarkshire Council and South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture. The plan was presented to the Performance and Review Scrutiny Forum in August last year, and an members' awareness session was held on the 12th of December. A further report will be presented to the Executive Committee in June 2025, again in line with the work on the 10-year estate strategy. Section 4 of the report provides information on the development of the commissioning plan to date. The plan aims to provide clarity in terms of the relationship between the Council and SLLC and its role as a provider of services to the Council, and a longer-term, more sustainable approach to how the Council and SLLC work together. The commissioning plan defines the strategic ask of SLLC over the medium to long term in support of the Council's own priorities and outcomes. In that respect, the Improving Outcomes section in Appendix 1 of the report, which is on page 95 of the pack, provides more detail on how that ask is being developed. This first plan is intended to cover the period from 2025 to 2027, with future iterations spanning a 5-year period to align it with each new Council plan. It recognises SLLC as a strategic lead and sole provider of leisure and cultural services on behalf of the Council. And although this is not a legal document itself, the plan will help define the legal relationship between the Council and SLLC by aligning the full suite of legal documents which govern that relationship between both parties and clarifying the requirements of each organisation. And an exercise to review, update and streamline the legal documentation will commence upon approval of the commissioning plan. In response to each of the new commissioning plan, South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture will develop its own 5-year strategy to ensure that resources are available and directed in the best way and at the right time to successfully deliver on the Council's priorities and outcomes. Section 5 of the report outlines initial proposals for monitoring, evaluation and reporting. A performance management framework will sit alongside the commissioning plan to monitor how our ask of SLLC is making a difference to the people and communities of South Lanarkshire. This will include a mechanism to update the plan as new data becomes available, and annual and interim performance reports focused on improving outcomes will be developed and reported to the Council for monitoring. In addition, operational performance will continue to be monitored by the SLLC board, with progress against local government benchmark framework monitored annually by the Council. Arrangements are in place for ongoing engagement with South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture Board as the plan develops. With that, I'll take you back to the recommendations at section 2 of the report, which are that a draft commissioning plan for South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture, as attached in Appendix 1, be noted, and that a further report on the South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture Commissioning Plan for the period 25 to 27 will be presented to the Executive Committee on the 25th of June 2025. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask if there are any questions in this report? And can I come to Alec Allison?
Thanks, Chair. First of all, thanks to David, because I did have a meeting with him, when was it? Earlier this week, where we discussed this, and both the paper itself and the discussion I had with him certainly left us with a positive opinion. I think this is the way we have to go. It actually reflects maybe what happened many years ago in a unformulated way, in that it basically happened. But having it down in writing, I think, is important. But the bottom line here, David, as I said to you, is not so much that we have a bit of paper with signatures on it, but that the service to our communities does improve, and that, as one of the papers here does, is evaluated. But what then happens if that evaluation does not come up to scratch, and how we then get it, our communities better served?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Councillor Allison, for your question. Yes, this is where this report, and in terms of the Commission plan, will link in again with the state strategy, and importantly with the financial relationship between South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture and the Council, because the Council, in paying its money to South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture, will be expecting a level of service in return for that. And And that level of money in terms of what we pay for the council will need to link into the ability of South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture to deliver on that plan. So there is a financial relationship that underpins what the commissioning plan will provide in the future. Is that helpful?
Okay, thank you. Could I come to Maureen Devlin?
Thanks, Chair. It's just actually to thank you for this commissioning plan, because we definitely do need to have clear expectations of what's required between South Lanarkshire and between the Leisure Trust. That has been sorely missed for years now. And as a member of the Trust, I really think it's important that we get this for the outcomes that you've just highlighted, so that we can offer the best possible service to our communities. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. To come back then to the recommendations, can we agree to note the report? Agreed. We'll come now to item 12, which is an item of urgent business on the composition of the council and membership places. This was circulated by email yesterday, and you should now all be in receipt of it. Can I ask Ian Strachan to update us on this report? Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Purpose of the report to advise of a change in composition of the Council following resignation of Councillor Lambie from the Conservative Group to join Reform UK and proposed allocation of committee places. As members will be aware, whilst there isn't a statutory requirement in terms of allocating membership places, we endeavour to reflect overall political balance in these memberships. I wouldn't propose to go through in any detail section 4 there. What I would say by way of an update verbally is, as regards the Rural Task Force, in discussion with Councillor Allison, believe that in fact that place should be retained by the Conservative Group, so propose to change that verbally today so that Councillor Lambie wouldn't retain his membership of the Rural Task Force. But if I may just take you briefly through the recommendations, asking that committee note the change in political composition, that Councillor Lambie be replaced by a member of the Conservative Group on the Conference Allocation Committee and also the Rural Task Force, that Councillor Lambie be replaced by a member of the Conservative Group on the two charitable trusts, one of the Conservative Group places on each of the resource committees, and the planning committee be allocated to be shared between Councillor Robb, Councillor Lambie and Councillor Horsham. One of the Conservative Group places on the Executive Committee and the Climate Change Sustainability Committee be allocated to Reform UK. Reform UK be allocated to place on the Employee Equalities, Diversity and Inclusion Forum and Standards and Procedures Advisory Forum, and that authority be delegated to the Chief Executive in consultation with the groups to finalise these memberships. I would say we've discussed the report with Councillor Lambie in advance of this as well, albeit I wasn't able to discuss with him today about the Rural Task Force, but I have advised him. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Can I ask if there are any questions on that report? I've not seen any questions, so with the changes that Ian has just outlined verbally, can I ask, can we agree the recommendations? Agreed. We are agreed. Can I thank everyone for your attendance today? I'll bring the meeting to a close.